Welcome to Paradigm Playbook, the podcast on the business of sports. With 50 plus years of experience, Steve Cook shares insights weekly, featuring top playmakers shaping the industry. Get ready to script your next play. Now, here's your host.
Hello and welcome to Paradigm Playbook. I'm your host, Steve Cook, alongside Christie Copeland. And I believe that Christie's been on with me a few times. And I believe the last time you were on with me, Christie, I officially proclaimed that you're no longer a guest. So we're saying my co-host today is Christie Copeland. And whether she likes it or not, she's a co-host. Today, we want to dig into stories of staff training or employee training. But before we do that, Christie, I want to give the audience a kind of a view of some of the businesses that you've owned or been part of so that everybody will get a better perception of the staff or staffs that you've helped trained over time.
Okay, so I'm in Michigan, thus the background. I owned two different gyms in Michigan and ran, prior to owning gyms for like 20 years, I was program director, was a team director, and then I also have a corporate job by day in the automotive industry where I do a lot of training on my specialty there, which is distribution networks in a two-tiered system. But I train a lot of the new people hiring in. I have over 30 years there. And so my tribal knowledge at this point, I pass that on quite a bit, teaching them about software. So between the gymnastics world as a leader, teaching leaders and my program directors, then also coaching kids, teaching people how to teach kids, things like that. And then in the corporate world as well.
And I would add to that in a consulting capacity. Christie also owns a consulting company and is constantly teaching. I don't know if you consider us staff or affiliates or whatever, but Christie spends time training folks like myself on technology and communication and website creation and advertising. So there's a lot of areas for training. To catch everybody up, it's been a while since I talked about my background. My education is in teaching. So I was trained as a physical education teacher, didn't teach for long, but also coached in the gymnastic world, extensively coached in the world of baseball, and have coached other sports, soccer, field hockey, volleyball, things like that. And then I've trained a sales team and coached my team through that. Currently, I'm acting as a consultant / coach in the world of business. They all have an aspect of training, but from a different point of view. So, Christie, I'll let you pick a start off point. What do we want to talk first about the tactical side of staff training?
So I was thinking about this, knowing that I was coming on, this was our topic. I think one of the things for us to delve into is that in our world today, and it's been going on for years, the turnover. So you have programs that have new staff coming in all the time. And you talked in a prior podcast with Casey Del Pret about some of the onboarding and that piece.
Right.
But the thing that I remember is, this is going to date myself, the old Bud Light Presents joke commercials. There was one that those who can't play coach, those who can't coach. The thing that we have to remember is sometimes the elite athletes don't know how to coach. They're so good that they don't necessarily know how to teach it because they were just so naturally talented. And then you have some coaches who are great at teaching the kids what to do, but they don't know how to teach another coach how to teach the kids. And I'm working with a couple of clients right now on that. And how do they develop ways to teach the coaches to also be teachers? Some people call it train the trainer. That was one of the things that I definitely wanted to talk about today for companies to get systems in place to make sure they have that ready so there's not just one person doing all the training.
I think turnover is one reason that you have to always be training. The other is that the outside world is not training for you. We find this in the gymnastic world specifically, whereas there used to be a lot of male gymnasts coming out of the college gymnastic market. When I competed, I think there were 300 collegiate NCAA programs, and now we're down to about 11. So there's not a lot of people training there. There also used to be on the market a lot of physical education teachers, my background, that actually our education is taught how to make that presentation to either kids or other teachers. So we're trained in how to do that teaching. And that has declined. Physical education is on the decline as we've added all this other curriculum into the school. You have to do sex education and computer education and social media and all those things training, so they don't have time for physical education quite as much, which saddens me, but that's another topic. Anyway, I think one, their turnover is fast, so you have to always be training. Two, you have to accelerate how fast you train them because you got to get them up to speed because you need them on the floor right now. So where do you start?
I think you have to have a couple of key people who are trained to do the training. But again, people need training on how to do training. And that's the piece that I think a lot of people miss. They just assume because someone's a good teacher that they can teach others to be a teacher. And so I think that piece is important, having several people, having something developed. Like you and I were talking before this, is there a chat bot where the person who is the great teacher has fed in all their information so the new staff can ask that chat bot? That way that person doesn't have to be available all the time, but it's truly all of their information. But I think getting out there and having things drawn out too. This is getting way into the weeds, but we're talking about teaching a parent taught class. In gymnastics, you have the parent taught class. In swim, a lot of times you have a parent taught class. You're teaching the parents how to be the coach in that way. The most important thing is in the gym is that the child doesn't run away and cause danger to someone else. But parents often don't know that. You've probably experienced that where it's like, why did that parent let their child run off? Because they have to be taught too. That's the most important thing. For coaches, maybe it's here's where you stand, here's where you can see the whole group. I think that is important. I think regular communication on it's important too. A lot of people will think it's one and done, and it just never ends. You're training people every day.
One of the second book that I wrote was specifically for coaching parents to coach their kids in baseball. And some of those teacher tricks that you're just talking about, you mentioned where to stand. And in every sport and in every situation, there's a right and a wrong. If you're coaching one-on-one, it's important, but maybe a little bit less important. So one-on-one, the position is a visual thing. You have to be square because if you're going to demonstrate something, you don't want them to see what you're doing from an angle because it looks different. What I talk about is a clear mirror, which brings in my second trick to training is learning your professional right and left. They harped on that from the time I went to college. If you're teaching a right-hander, you demonstrate with your left hand so that what they're seeing reflects what they need to do. We're not making a 5-year-old translate, reverse the image, and then duplicate. Setting a mirror image, professional right and left is important. And then what you said about standing, one, you have to be where you're in clear view of every child and every child is in clear view of you. Let's say we're coaching uneven bars. For those that aren't in that world, it's a common station at a gymnastic club. The kids are all going to work on uneven bar skills at the same time, but you have a low bar, a high bar, 2 floor bars, stall bars, and you as a teacher have 8 to 10 children that you have to be directing at all times, not physically spotting or speaking to, but you have to see what's going on. So it takes this peripheral vision, which I think is a trained skill of good teachers.
I agree. And you have to not trip over the bar cables all while doing that, right? There's a lot of obstacles as well. I think you're completely right. It's like when, the saying, who has the eyes in the back of their head, their parent, mom can see. It's learned, especially with a lot of the young staff who now, their focus has been a cell phone or a digital screen. How do you know what's going on around you? We're dealing with that right now with training a teenage driver. Like you can't just have tunnel vision. And it's the same thing with being in a coaching position is you've got to be aware of all of your surroundings all of the time.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Now that cars have backup mirrors, backup cameras, it would be cool to have that as a teacher. Let's move on to another topic, your visual presence and training your teachers to know where to stand and, what to show is one important thing. The next thing I like to dig into that we as speakers learn this all the time is there's a different voice for different intention. So if you're trying to drive something home, you want something a little louder, a little sterner. And if you want to draw the student in, it's a little quieter and a little bit inclusive. Talk about how you can use your voice to train students or train trainers.
I think that you have to be very intuitive on your audience. If it's kids, obviously, if you're with a group of 4-year-olds, you're going to bring them in normally by fun or by, my preschool director was just amazing amazing at that. And I would try it. And I think some people just have a gift and others don't. With a group of higher level competitive kids, you're speaking completely differently. But I think it's a challenge for a lot of people to be able to make that shift, trying to talk to their audience and also talking to the level of your audience. So you might think you're talking on that level and you're not. That has been feedback for me over years of time at General Motors, is to really realize if your audience is getting what you're saying. Whether you have the right tone or not may not even matter if they don't even understand what you're talking about.
So volume and tone are two things that are important. And I think that when you're training your trainers, training your teachers, that's one thing you have to do, is make them purposeful about how they're using their voice. And when they want to get the children to think about what they're saying, they have to give them time to think. So when you ask your question, you can't ask it real fast and move on. You have to ask it, take time for them to think about it, and then you can come back to it. I think volume, tone, and then speed of delivery. Sometimes we say there's three things you have to do. You have to start with your hands up, immediately drop your arms to your side, take your left foot forward, and all of a sudden we've piled this on them so fast. My rules in my book, that they're all my made up rules, is the rule of 5. When I'm teaching young children, I only ever stack 5 things that they have to do. Every skill can be done with 5 rules. Now, as they get older, every one of the 5 may break down into 5, but I start with 5. And if you want to throw a baseball, there's only 5 things you need to know. And I visually show them 5 things. You want to throw a baseball, you have to raise your hand in the air. So I go through the whole process and make it a very visual learning thing. You started this off saying that not always superior athletes make great coaches initially. They have the depth of knowledge. There's content knowledge there, but the delivery knowledge, I think they're all capable if we take the time to teach them. And I remember once I was talking with one of my coaches, this is at the baseball academy. You know, he was training a catcher and the catcher kept dropping the ball. And I said, have you ever told him the starting position of the glove? Because they were holding the glove there. And if you watch catchers now, catchers hold their glove sideways, always. That's how a catcher catches. It's intuitive to hold the glove fingers up. So if we're talking about catching a pop-up, it's fingers up. If you're a catcher, it's fingers sideways. If it's a ground ball, it's fingers down. But you have to go through this and visually demonstrate what you're doing. You as a gymnastic coach know the value of demonstration better than anyone, I would think.
Oh, completely. And what you're saying reminds me of the situation where sometimes you bring in someone else and you feel like they said exactly what you have been saying for the last 7 weeks. Then the child all of a sudden is catching with their hand, but it's sometimes hearing it a different way. And we years ago went from don't bend your legs to straighten your legs. The brain hears it's don't think about the elephant in the room situation. What do you just think about? The elephant. So saying it in a way that don't have your fingers up versus turn your hand sideways, telling them what to do versus what not to do, because they're going to hear the thing that you don't want them to hear.
I think that's keys. And young teachers don't understand that from the beginning, to teach in do's and not don'ts. Just tell them, and it doesn't take that much time to go through this and teach in do's. When you had your gymnastics academy, did you have a staff manual or something? And did it include tips for teaching?
So we did. We had 2 different things. We had the staff handbook, which had kind of the teaching principles. Jeff Metzger, I used him as a model. You know, we're going to be kind to children. We're going to speak positively, you know, things like that. That's one category.
Luckily, we all have a little Jeff Metzger in us.
Yeah, exactly. Goodness for Jeff Metzger. And then we had developed by program. So our recreational gymnastics program it would go through different stations and skills that they would teach. So it was more specific to the actual lesson planning versus like just an overall thing that you would use. Each time we did a new lesson plan, we would train on the lesson plan.
I think it's important that these things get written down. And some of these tips, you know, you could do 1 sheet or 2 sheets or a chart on the wall or whatever that would encompass this. Another one we have trouble in baseball specifically is the consistency of communication. So we're saying the right word. I'll use the illustration. If you step into the batter's box and and you're in the wrong spot. If I say move back, now do you move towards the catcher? Do you move away from home plate? Do you move 1 foot? Do you move both feet? If I say close your stance. So when I'm coaching little league coaches that are doing this for the first time, I say this requires a meeting because the kids are going to have a different coach every year. Everybody's got to learn to do the same thing. So in and out, forward and back, open and close mean different things, but we have to be consistent with how we're saying those. Another thing on vocabulary is, so a lot of people get to a certain station in life and they've done a lot to develop a very affluent vocabulary. The problem is we're not using a vocabulary that is suitable for a 7-year-old child. So even simple words that make sense to us, and we make this mistake in baseball, is okay, stand with your feet parallel. Parallel is a concept that maybe they don't have yet. And in gymnastics, where we're so much focused on body mechanics, and I don't know, I always make the case that it's the most complicated physical activity for anyone to learn, at the same time, the most important for anyone to learn. I don't know if you can think of a vocabulary instance in gymnastics that we would want to avoid.
I just think of a couple things that are standard. Arms by your ears.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Where are your arms going? And if you're listening, you're seeing Steve and I act this out. But what does that mean to a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old? Arms by your ears. It doesn't mean anything. You either have to show it or you have to come up with stand up tall and reach your arms for the sky or whatever, like you say, to the age group that you're working with. But even to an older child who's never heard that before, that means zero. It doesn't mean anything. The other thing is, I had a coach that would always say, engage your core. What does that mean what does it even mean to an adult? Engage your core, but she was looking for tight abs and a tight stomach and back, but engage your core. It was her standard.
And the child's looking for an apple.
Exactly.
It's interesting you say that. The whole thing with arms up happens in baseball all the time. I teach throwing with 5 steps. I try to have every step one word. I like one word descriptions. So I would never say lift your arms over your head. So I got to the point, and I've done this for 25 years. So my easiest one to get both hands fully extended is to say touchdown. So I use the word touchdown in a baseball lesson, but I mean touchdown, both hands all the way up. The other thing that I add whenever I can is rhyming words. The whole scenario of throwing a baseball, and I start them in the right position footways. The first word is sideways. You have to turn sideways to the target you're throwing to. I do describe it, but when calling out the drills, I just use one word so they know sideways. Then it's touchdown, glove down, throw down, bend down. And there's a little rhyme, there's a little thing so the kids can say it. I think it's important to get your teachers to think creatively. How can this paint a picture in the student's head? It's like, if you want a straight body, is it engage your core or is it be a pencil? Things like that, I think. And we've all learned a little bit from Patty Camaro, who is a master at teaching preschool gymnastics. And she's been around as long as I have in coaching gymnastics, but she's good at those little terminology things. I had one more that came to my head. So we talked about volume, speech, vocabulary, words, pictures. There's one more. What am I missing? Oh, sequence. Sequence is the more experienced athlete, when translating it, doesn't remember all the steps they took to learn it because a lot of them learned it easily. What do you mean you have to teach them how to throw a ball? Just throw it. And that's not intuitive to most children. Whereas maybe something like tuck your head, what does that mean? Whereas if you say put your chin on your chest, that is more descriptive of what you want them to do.
Like vaulting, running and hurdling. Once you're a high level athlete, that's second nature. And when you're the little ones, have no idea how to even decide what foot to go to the board, let alone in gymnastics we're talking about vaulting, the vaulting springboard. But I think that's a great example of where you build on that as time goes on and certain things just become second nature, a hurdle on floor for a cartwheel or a round off or something like that, that has to be completely broken down at the beginning.
Yeah, a lot of times we neglect the starting point, run to the vault board, but we're not teaching them how to run. And kids are great at copying. And I remember in the beginning, years ago, you can probably remember, but there was one gymnast that ran with straight arms, very straight. She was a good gymnast, Olympic caliber gymnast, but she ran with straight arms, which happened to work for her, but wasn't the right way to teach running. It's not the right way to pump your arms. I think even backing it off and teaching preliminary skills to preliminary activities isn't always done. And we just have to understand that your new coaches that you're hiring don't know all these things. They haven't been through it. You mentioned Jeff Metzger, but in terms of learning how to teach the skills, if you had a mentor or somebody that helped you with that, but we have to realize in most cases, we are the only one that's ever tried to teach this person how to teach this activity. So it has to be very intentional.
And we were fortunate being in Michigan. We're only about 3 hours from Patty Camara, who you mentioned, and we would send our preschool coaches down to spend time with her and her staff to do learning. And so that was phenomenal from the beginning for our preschool program. And then I had local coaches who were my mentors, who I went up to learn from as far as like the higher level skills. And I think the lower level, sometimes you develop it over time. You do need to go out and learn from others as well. In congresses, gymnastics congresses, and different things like that were so instrumental. I mean, there are sessions now where they teach you things on how to teach that I could still benefit from today. So I think continuing that learning is super important too.
I want to take this to the next level. And as you build a business, and basically our audience are business owners, but you're training people in business aspects of it. So I don't think you should leave it to intuition as to how to read a P&L statement or how to develop an SOP, a standard operating procedure for any job, or how do we answer the phone. I think all of these take specific training, and the more you can develop, you mentioned you had a company handbook or an employee handbook. One, I think that should be a very fluid document. And two, I'll wake up tomorrow morning and realize I know more than I did yesterday. And so if we think we're going to write an owner's manual about how to teach and we're going to do it and it's done, I think that's a mistake. I think we have to be developing this all the time. And two, there are some people that, and you can probably come up with a story, some people that come to you, you're training them and they say, well, I've always done this. What do you think? And you go, wow, that's great. And that becomes part of it. An open system for adding to this. It's all got to be approved by you and put in. But with everything we have available to us in AI and in technology, there's no reason that this isn't a major chapter in everyone's handbook. We talk a lot about gymnastics because Christie and I come from that world, but it doesn't matter whether it's soccer, it's ballet, it's Tai Chi, whatever it is, you have to get to the basics of it and you have to document it and help your teachers accelerate faster.
You made a great point that it's not just teaching the teachers who are teaching the kids in any business. You're teaching your front staff. We're teaching your finance department. You're teaching people how to run the CRM, but everything needs documentation and a procedure. When you answer the phone, how do you answer the phone? So I think that's super important, and that it's, like you say, a living, breathing document that as something new is discovered that's better, you update it, replace it, and you don't just teach it once. It's taught every day in your business and not just one time and then you put it away.
And one of the things that Christie's taught me for the podcast and we have a lot of online meetings in our business world, and the AI feature in that takes notes for you. I'll never forget the first meeting that Christie and I had, and within probably 5 minutes of the end of the meeting, she sent me a bulleted point outline of everything we had talked about, organized, and I went, wow, this girl is fast. I recently took I think it was an 11-page parent waiver form and asked the system to bullet point this for me on one page. Even if you're using all 11 points of the waiver, if you had this bullet point, you put that at the front and say, this document covers, this is what you're signing. So it clarifies things, and we can do that with teacher training as well. Okay, we could go on forever about that.
We hope that you've learned something from us today and that you want to learn from us for 2.5 days in Orlando, Florida this December at the Third Level Consulting Signature Business Workshop, where Steve has been the mastermind behind putting this together for Third Level. But Steve, do you want to give a little bit more about that?
We're putting it together in workshop format so that everybody comes away from the event with a blueprint, a playbook of what to do to increase their enrollment and make more money. It's going to be a hands-on detail. We're not going to be teaching flips or, swimming the butterfly. We're going to be talking about business, and we will get into everything from SOP to financial planning to strategy development. We've got room for, we maxed out our room at 150 people. It just went online and made available. Registration is going strong, which we're very pleased about, but we don't want anybody that's our listeners here to miss out on it. So if you go to the Third Level website, go to the event section, you can find out more information and sign up there.
Sounds great. See you next time.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Make it a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to Paradigm Playbook. Explore more at ParadigmPlaybook.com. Want to be a playmaker? Contact StephenJCook.com. Share this episode to spread the word about sports industry opportunities. See you next week.